So this is Taylor Mason. I'm here today with Representative Aerion Abney. This is an ongoing oral history project on the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus and its impact on staff. So thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you for having me.
So just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives.
Yeah, so just a quick background, if I can. So I'm originally from Philadelphia, and I came to Pittsburgh in 2006 to go to University of Pittsburgh. I graduated from Pitt with a bachelor's degree in communications and a master's degree in social work, also from Pitt. And so I always consider myself not as a politician or really as an elected official. I always tell folks that my profession is that I'm a social worker. I was a social worker before I was ever elected. I'm a social worker while I'm elected. And, when this portion of my career is said and done, I will continue to remind folks that I'm a social worker. That is part and parcel to who I am as a human being. And part of the reason why I decided to kind of go into the helping profession space. And so I'm probably, if you look at my career path, I'm an untraditional social worker. I've never worked in sort of direct service case management per se. I've always been a more macro level, big picture type of social worker. So I kind of live my professional life at the intersection of politics, philanthropy, and just like civil rights. And so when I graduated with my MSW from Pitt, I started off as actually a legislative assistant for then State Representative Jake Wheatley, who I currently am holding the seat for. And so I was there for about 2.5 years and then moved on and became the program officer at a local foundation in Pittsburgh. It's called the Poise Foundation. It is the only African-American owned and operated community foundation in the country. And so I was able to provide grants to different nonprofit organizations all across Allegheny County that had a focus on providing services for the African-American community. And then after that, I moved on to work in the voting rights space. So I was the Pennsylvania Director of Special Programs for an organization called All Voting is Local. And they focused on voting rights and election administration work across the state to ensure that everybody who wanted to be able to vote didn't have barriers presented to them to ensure that they had access to the ballot as much as they possibly could. And then, for me, I've always saw the correlation between social work and politics in the sense, again, that they're both helping professions. And I always saw elected officials, if they were doing their job the right way, as social workers with just a different level of influence. And so I, decided to put my name in the hat and into the political arena, and thought that I could use this position as state representative, like I've used my other positions, as leverage and spheres of influence to try to change the realities of struggle for people.
Okay. I didn't know you worked for Jake Wheatley. That's really interesting. I didn't know you worked for him prior to that. So what's your relationship then like with him and maybe other predecessors who served the 19th legislative district then?
So the only other predecessor before Jake that I knew was Bill Robinson.
Okay. Yep.
Robinson. So I had the fortune of meeting him a few times and had some really good conversations just about, the importance of the role and being able to understand that, people send you there to do a job and to, both he and Jake used to tell me that, in this position, you're the eyes and the ears and the voice of the people that you represent. And so I certainly, take that and carry that with me in this role. And even though I've never had the pleasure of meeting the person before K. Leroy Irvis, who was before Mr. Robinson, but everybody knows he's a legend, right? Everybody knows. So certainly following those three gentlemen, I have some big shoes to fill, and I understand that. And one thing I did learn about Mr. Irvis is that he never really saw himself as a politician. He was a statesman, is what he would always say, right? And he saw the difference between a politician and a statesman as a politician being somebody who, would say anything that they had to say or do anything that they had to do to get elected or to gain power. But a statesman was someone who was willing to put the best interests and the common good, the people that they were selected to represent first, And so I try to just take all of those things that I've learned from those three gentlemen and, try to carry the torch forward.
Okay. All right, so you want a special election then, following Jake Wheatley moving to the mayor's office.
Correct.
So what has been your experience so far being a person of color in the House? Do you think there's been extra hurdles or obstacles in getting bills passed, and getting any committees assignments, legislative work, anything like that?
Well, I think so far I've been sort of leaning on the strength of the fact that we have a very organized and coordinated Black Caucus, led by our chair, Representative Donna Bullock, whose leadership has really helped me to understand a lot of the issues that the Black Caucus has been pushing for and advocating for before I got there, and allows me to kind of fit within sort of those bucket items. And so, I've got really good committees. I feel like my committees definitely speak to the interests of my district. Definitely speak to areas where I, push for when I campaigned. So I'll make sure I get this right. So I am on urban affairs. I am on local government. I am on insurance, aging and older adults. And I think I just got put on finance as well.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of committees.
So I'm, still adjusting accordingly, still trying to, get to know everybody, get to know sort of what other reps' interests are, what their district needs are, and where there's opportunities for alignment and collaboration, as well as, I have introduced solely at least one piece of legislation, and I've co-sponsored several pieces of legislation, and looking to, do more of that. I'm sure we can talk about that in more detail going forward, but, it's so far just because I did come in on a special, as well as I did win my primary soon thereafter, but because I've kind of been thrown into the fire, it's just been a learning curve, just trying to adjust to everything.
And you and Representative Covington, I'm like, I'll email them. Say, I know there's probably not been as much experience as some of the other members, but every opinion counts towards our project. So that's great to know. But going back to your district a little bit, so what is the makeup of your district, and what sort of issues are important to your constituents at the moment right now?
Absolutely. So my district covers the entire district is within the city limits of Pittsburgh proper, so it doesn't go out to any townships or other municipalities, but it does cross all three rivers, and it is a very eclectic and diverse district, not just in terms of racially diverse, but the social and economic. There's a lot of social and economic diversity within my district. So you have neighborhoods that are traditionally more affluent, those like Central North Side, like the Mexican War Streets area, the North Shore. I have downtown Pittsburgh, which is a huge economic generator for the Commonwealth. But then we have neighborhoods that are still going through some transitions, like Beltsuver and Knoxville and Manchester, parts of the Hill District and Hazelwood. And so, there's just, different needs. There are everything from, basic constituent services on, hey, I've got this issue with PennDOT, need to get my driver's license updated, all the way to I'm dealing with some unemployment issues, or we're having housing crisis in our neighborhood, a lack of quality, attainable housing in our communities, to education. So it covers a wide gambit, right? I'll have some neighbors who, their biggest priority is they want to have, city trash cans in their neighborhood because they care about the preservation and the cleanliness of their neighborhoods, where in other neighborhoods we have, high crime or issues with, gun violence and contraband and a lot of police activity. And so, just have to be flexible and nimble to be able to adjust to the different needs and understand really from my position how I can go to Harrisburg and identify, what the resources that we can bring back from Harrisburg into these specific neighborhoods that actually meet the needs that people are looking for. And so I would say one of the common themes that I've recognized across all the neighborhoods in my district is just around attainable housing and making sure as we have this new Pittsburgh that we're transitioning into and we have more development and we welcome development, that we have responsible development that respects anti-displacement strategies so we can have development without displacement, and we can ensure that we are not ethnically cleansing our neighborhoods with the means of economics.
You kind of touched on this earlier, but we'll move now to the Black Caucus itself.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you don't have a solid answer yet, but what has been your involvement so far with the Black Caucus, or maybe what are some things you want to work on with the caucus?
Yeah, so I would say probably within 2 weeks of me getting sworn in, the chair, Rep. Bullock, reached out to me and said, "Hey, we've been pushing some bills that haven't necessarily had as much traction in the past, but we have one that we think, based off of conversations, you might be interested in." And so I was able to introduce a piece of legislation that was recommended by the Black Caucus. And forgive me because the bill number is, I want to say it's 2607, but let me circle back with you to double check. But it's a criminal justice data collection program. And essentially what it will do is it will require our, the Bureau of Crime and Delinquency would be required to work with our criminal justice facing institutions like our police forces, our jails, our court systems to require them to collect data, non-identifying information on the folks that interact with our criminal justice system. So just, their age, their race, the dates in which, they interact with the system, to allow us to have better comprehensive data that can tell us the experiences of folks as they were interacting with the different levels of our criminal justice system. So for example, if someone in Erie County, African-American person, gets arrested as a first-time offender, and someone in Forest County gets arrested who is a Caucasian first-time offender for the same exact crime, is the system treating that person when they get booked the same way through the process in Erie County as in Forest County? So, is the person in pretrial detention for the same amount of time, or is the person in Erie County staying in there longer? Is when they both get their trial, is the sentencing the same? Or if they both get convicted, or if they have to serve time in jail, is their sentencing time the same? And just trying to take that data across all of our counties, and what it will do is it'll create a comprehensive report that will be released both to the General Assembly and be released to the general public, which will then allow us to review that report and hopefully make policy prescriptions to say, hey, there are some chinks in the armor of our criminal justice system that we can then, as legislators, change the policies to make it more equitable and fair across our counties. Because the last thing that we want is to have this oxymoronic situation where we have this thing called a criminal justice system, but it's actually not just. And we know every once in a while we say, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, it seems like every once in a while picks up the blind and peeks around to see who she might be looking at, and then delivers justice differently. And so we want to make sure that, as in our role as legislators, to make sure that isn't happening. And hopefully this bill, if it gets passed, will not resolve all of our problems, but it will help move us in the right direction. We can actually use data to drive policy prescriptions.
Okay. So do you think that the General Assembly will become more diverse in future terms with the great relationships the Black Caucus is providing within the General Assembly? Do you think it'll become more diverse in the future?
Absolutely, 100%. I just think about, and I think it's multifaceted, right? So it's not just what can the General Assembly do to sort of incentivize a more diverse group of folks who may run for office, but I think and we are doing that. You even look at what has happened with redistricting and the way that is laid out this year, that it looks like it's going to be more reflective of the Commonwealth, more reflective of the population, where you have more opportunities for Black and brown folks and folks of color and women to, be more incentivized to run. I think on the political side of things, there are always going to be challenges. Sometimes I think the lack of access to capital for fundraising sometimes prevents good folks from running for office when they say, oh, I'm going to run for state rep or state senator. And then they realize what it actually takes to either beat an incumbent or how much money you have to raise. And we don't naturally have those built-in networks for us to say, hey, I'm a lawyer. I have, 20 lawyer friends that can all write me big checks and do that. And so I think sometimes that prevents good people and people of color and more diverse folks from actually getting into office. But what I will say is that beyond just the maps looking different, I think these past several elections and people realizing that there are folks who are out here who are making decisions about their everyday quality of life are sort of having a new perspective on it and saying, hey, if you're not going to represent me the way that I think me and my community should be represented, I'm going to try to figure out how I can plug into different networks so that I can then run for office myself. And I think you're just seeing just a new wave of younger people. I think even in Allegheny County, if you look at over the past 10, 20 years, it has gotten a lot younger and it's gotten a lot diverse in terms of our delegation in the state house. And then I think that's going to be something that you're going to see a lot more across the Commonwealth. People are just excited and they want to get involved and they want to be participatory in sort of the political world.
And my last question then, how has the Black Caucus impacted your overall House service so far? Maybe you don't have as much of a solid answer yet, but it sounds like it's been a huge impact on you already.
Yeah, I would say definitely being able to get my first bill introduced. And that was definitely a highlight for me to be able to show that I'm going to work and doing what I can. But I think even in just the informal way, all the members have been very welcoming. Like just, hey, Aerion, what do you need? How can we support you? How can we ensure that you're getting the resources that you need to, show your district that you're doing everything that you can? And, whether it is, just having offline conversations, whether we're at lunch or we're on the House floor, just being very supportive and them recognizing that I'm new and at one point everybody was new and they know what it's like to be a little bit possibly overwhelmed with everything that goes on in Harrisburg, especially coming in hitting the ground running after a special election and getting sworn in the middle of a term and within a month before budget negotiations. And so it's a lot to sort of prepare for. And they've just been, any questions that I've ever had, they've all been very helpful in helping me get the answers so that I'm as well informed as I possibly can to make a good decision for my district.
Okay, well, that was my last question. Do you have anything else you'd like to add or discuss before we end?
I don't think so. I think that covered a pretty good base. Certainly, if you have any follow-up that you want to do, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to, help out and participate in what you all are doing. And thank you again for what you're doing. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for doing this. It's great.